You know, there are some things in Deltarune that I don't fully understand. Gaster and what he's up to, no idea. Sometimes I think he's working with Carol and her crew, and sometimes I think he's just an observer of Deltarune. What's the Knight and Carol's plan? Beats me. I truly have no idea what sacrificing Undyne could achieve for Carol. Where's the weird route going? No clue. If I had to guess, the players glitching their way to the end game in an attempt to find secrets. Those questions are above my pay grade, and I know that those questions are for the minds of Andrew Cunningham and Spooky Dude only. I know that these large-scale questions are designed to be a mystery that we don't have all the clues to, so I know not to worry myself about them. Out of sight, out of mind. However, there are some mysteries about this game that I do think about, and the more I think about them, the more they don't make sense. For instance, why does Alphys replace a man respected in his field of work in both Undertale and Deltarune? In Undertale, it's of course Gaster, and in Deltarune, it's Gerson. Both of these characters are regarded as incredible people that are mourned when they're gone. And why do both of their names start with G? And the thing is, I know I'm getting at nothing because this pattern is not shared by any other Undertale character, so I guess it's just a coincidence. Another mystery that I have running around in my head is Ralsei. Like, what are they? In Chapter 1, I'm positive we're meant to draw a connection between them and Asriel, but for the rest of the game, it drops the subject and just kinda kicks it every now and then. In Chapter 2, there's a completely missable area where Noelle will remark that Ralsei looks like someone she knows. In Chapter 3, if you make Chris tell Ralsei that they look like Asriel, Ralsei just kinda shrugs and waves the comment away. They don't even do it in the way that looks like they're hiding something. Plus, Chris will laugh at the comparison, suggesting that they think it's ridiculous too. And then in Chapter 5, Ralsei is hiding from Asgore the whole chapter. This of course makes me think that something's going on with Ralsei again, but then right at the end of the chapter, Asgore says, they look like Asriel, but they actually don't even look like a monster. Every time the topic is brought up, they don't do anything with it. Those are among the many questions running around my Deltarune-focused head. However, one question has been in my head way longer than the rest, one that I ponder and almost nothing comes out of it every time. And that question is, how does monster biology work in Deltarune? In Undertale, monster biology is pretty simple because it's not only explained to us in like the third area of the game, but there's a route devoted to killing any monster you see and getting their guts on your hands. In Undertale, monsters are made out of magic, and for some reason are specified in Undertale to need water to survive. Isn't it weird to say that? Like, everything on Earth needs water to drink. That's not special for monsters. The game telling us that makes me think they have some sort of special connection to water, but they never say what that is, so I guess they just need water like humans do. I mean, I know that you can save Undyne by pouring water on her, but I guess that's just because I assumed that she was overheating and also part fish. Anyway, monsters are described as being weaker than humans. In fact, the game literally tells us that it would take every monster in the underground to match the strength of one adult human. This is presumably because monster bodies can't have high amounts of determination, and if they somehow get a lot of determination, they will start to melt. We know this because of the Amalgamites in the True Lab, who had determination literally injected into them, and Undyne, who melts in front of our very eyes because of her refusal to give up to Frisk. Because of their ability to have a lot of determination, human souls can exist outside of their body even if they don't have the determination soul. Determination souls just get the added bonus of being able to reset timelines. Monsters don't get these abilities because of their determination limitations. The only exceptions are boss monsters, who have souls that can exist outside of their bodies, but only for a short moment. Being a boss monster is a trait that can be passed down from parent to offspring. We know this because both Asgore and Asriel have boss monster souls in Undertale. Killing a monster in Undertale results in them exploding into dust. They don't bleed or anything else like that. They just dematerialize. Okay, besides Sunderplane, but I don't really know what to make of that. Ghosts in Undertale basically follow the same rules. They count as monsters, when killed they dematerialize. However, on top of all of that, they can possess objects like dummies and robots. All of this information about monster biology tracks and is reinforced by the actions in-game, except for one. No, not Sunderplane, I'm clearly talking about Sans. All the main bosses in Undertale mess with the battle UI in some way. Asgore gets rid of your spare button, Omega Flowey controls your save file, and Asriel gives himself crazy stats. Sans does the exact same thing. He understands that you have the ability to save and load, and fights against that by trying to be an annoying, difficult boss that fights with you in ways that you've never had to deal with before. His hope isn't to defeat you, just make you give up. He dodges your attacks, he attacks you in the battle menu, he even tries to softlock you by keeping you in the soul arena so you can't keep fighting. However, if you finally manage to beat Sans, he doesn't explode into dust or melt, he bleeds. At the time, this raised a ton of questions. Why can Sans bleed? Is he human? Is he Ness? Why doesn't his brother bleed? And don't even start, it can't be ketchup. I have no way to disprove it, but it just can't. This has to be something important. You can't sit here and tell me that the one monster that doesn't die the same way that everyone else does in the kill everyone route isn't important. It's also not a situation where monsters bleed before becoming dust, because we've never seen that before, and there were moments where if that was true, it would have been shown. Sans being able to bleed was added to the mounting pile of Sans isn't from Undertale evidence, and for a while, that's where it stopped. That's until Deltarune Chapter 1 released, and between all the Chris is Kara, Ralsei is Asriel, and Genocide Part 2 theories, we quickly discovered that monsters in Deltarune don't have magic. This obviously begs the question, if monsters in Undertale are made out of magic, and monsters in Deltarune are not, do they bleed? At first glance, Chapter 1 really seemed to be hinting that monster biology rules from Undertale wouldn't transfer to Deltarune. To start off, it would make logical sense. If monsters in Deltarune can't perform magic, it would make sense that they wouldn't be made out of magic either. On top of that, Susie makes the comment, "Everyone bleeds, right? Don't worry about it." No, Susie, I actually can't not worry about it. On top of that, guess who makes an appearance in Deltarune? Sans. The evidence of monsters having more organic biology in Deltarune would only grow from here. Lancer mentions having a blood bucket, there's a gamer blood drink in Icy's Pizza, as well as a monster employee mentioning their blood boiling for battle. However, all of this evidence pales in comparison to literally seeing Susie bleed in Chapter 4. And before you start, no, it's actually blood, not Susie's fruit juice from church. Just like Sans, I can't prove it, but I just know it's blood. All of this evidence ties monster biology together really well. In Deltarune, since monsters aren't made out of magic, monsters are made out of actual organs, including blood. It contextualizes Sans bleeding in Undertale as a hint that Sans isn't from Undertale, but in fact Deltarune. It all makes sense and answers every question, is what I would say if I wasn't purposefully hiding something from you. To start, ghosts seem to work the same in Deltarune and Undertale. This complicates things because, like I said before, ghosts in Undertale are made out of magic, and we literally see a ghost possess an object in Chapter 5. If you're like a scientist in the comments and you know a way that possession can happen in a non-magical way, tell me, but for now I can't see any other way. As well as the mere existence of ghosts throwing a wrench in all monsters having natural bodies, in Chapter 1, a child in Hometown asks Chris if it hurts having blood gushing inside of them. And in Chapter 4, the same chapter we see Susie bleed, we literally learn that the old man was what the fandom calls a Dustner, a Lightner revived in the form of a Darkner by an object important to the Lightner covered in their dust, aka their corpse. The thing that makes these three anomalies of monster biology so annoying is that they couldn't exist without the other. I mean, I guess they could, they just wouldn't be strong pieces of evidence. On their own, these pieces of evidence could easily be explained away. Oh, this kid thinks that only humans have blood? Well, kids are stupid. This kid is clearly just not educated enough. Oh, just because the old man's body is dust doesn't mean it always was. They could have just cremated him before laying him to rest. One example of Deltarune's monster biology being challenged is a mistake. 3 examples is enough to make a 15-minute video about. Real quick, I want to talk about Onion-san and normal NPC. For the whole game, Onion-san's been having a side plot where they keep hearing music at the bottom of the lake. They eventually go check the bottom of the lake for music, and we haven't seen them since. When we go to see them, we find normal NPC at the lake instead. Normal NPC. I don't know what their problem is. Their only job in the game is to be a roadblock. They block you from reading books in the library, and they block you from talking to Onion-san at the lake. That's until Chapter 5, where they run a shop at the festival where they sell fried octopus that tastes like onions. Now, I honestly don't know for sure what's up with normal NPC, so I can't really speak on why they talk so weird or why they originally ask you to pay for their food with G, but I do feel qualified to talk about the food that normal NPC is selling. As much as it could make sense for a normal NPC to cook up Onion-san for knowing too much, I don't think they did. To start, it just feels too dark to put in the normal route of the game. Like, imagine Toby having to explain to his team how making a group of children eat a resident of their beloved community is important to the story of Deltarune. I feel like this is probably more meant to be symbolism that whatever Onion found at the bottom of the lake is bad news, and Onion-san got hurt by whatever they saw, and to hint that wherever Chris and Noelle go in Chapter 7 Side B will be a seriously dangerous place. Anyway, my point in saying all of this is that whatever old normal NPC is selling is probably not Onion-san, and therefore can't be used as evidence for monsters in Deltarune having organic matter. So, where do we go from here? We have evidence that monsters in Deltarune have organic bodies, and some outliers that suggest otherwise. On the organic side of evidence, we have Sans bleeding, Susie bleeding, and the IC guy who talks about his blood. On the non-organic side, we have Weird Bunny Kid who's curious about blood, ghosts in general, and Gerson's dusty corpse. The idea that's been floating around in the fandom is that the monsters that can bleed are part human. It's a good crossroad. It does answer our conflicting pieces of evidence pretty well. Some monsters are made out of dust, and others are made out of more organic matter. The problem for me is that it just feels pretty arbitrary. Yes, we know that monster-human couples could exist in Undertale due to the 10th anniversary livestream, but to be honest, I don't really know how canon all that stuff is. However, this theory works best with Susie. She clearly has a weird experience with being a monster, and Hometown is probably one of her first times ever living in a fully monster town. However, narratively speaking, I don't like how this works with Susie. Chris and Susie are meant to complement each other by being from opposite worlds. Chris is a human in a monster town who's probably never even left Hometown. Susie is a monster presumably in the foster care system who's only lived her life with humans in a ton of different cities and towns. I feel like this would kind of ruin Susie's story slightly if Susie's weird relationship with being a monster came from being part human rather than just not being exposed to monster culture. Moving away from Susie, this theory being true would mean that Sans is also part human, which I'm not a fan of. First of all, how would that even work biologically? I feel like a skeleton with organic body parts would just be a human. But on top of that, where would Sans be bleeding from? I know that bones have some blood in them, but where would the vital organs be? You see what I mean? This theory only works well with Susie, and even then feels shaky to me in practice. Even if I don't like half-human theory, Sans and Susie still bleed while presumably the rest of Hometown doesn't. So where do I go from here? Well, I have an idea, and while it's ultimately a stretch, I think it's worth talking about. Like I've talked about through the whole video, the two characters in both Undertale and Deltarune that we know to bleed are Susie and Sans. But what do these two characters have in common? Well, they both have names that start with S, and they both say get dunked on at least once in their debut games, and most importantly, neither of them are meant to be in Undertale. What I mean by this is that Susie never shows up in Undertale physically, and Sans is from Deltarune and somehow made it to Undertale unintentionally. On top of that, they both have Gaster-related imagery associated with them. The clam girl in Undertale who mentions how we'll meet Susie soon ends up being a goner, and Sans uses Gaster blasters in his genocide fight. So immediately these two characters end up in Undertale unnaturally by a force that is probably Gaster. This led me to believe that monsters that bleed are only monsters not originally in Undertale. This works with Susie and Sans, but if we believe that the IC guy was not lying about having blood, this works for them too. I know this sounds like a stretch, but stay with me here. A huge emerging theme in Deltarune is taking something and remaking, reusing, and adding things to it until it becomes unrecognizable. We see this in Tenna's boards becoming a linear mess when you originally had more freedom, and the Prophecy becoming a book series and then a video game. In Deltarune, we see examples of things being taken from Undertale and being reused and remade into something else. Susie, Sans, and IC Guy are an example of something new being added to the game. I'm not even saying that it's just these three. There could be way more characters in Hometown that follow this rule as well. If you want to go even deeper, we can talk about how Gaster is a scientist, not a magician. Of course his creations would be organic and scientific and made out of blood and guts rather than being made out of magic. Okay, I can hear you from the other side of the screen. You think that I'm just saying that Susie and Sans are goners. And to that, I say no. Goners talk about living in a world that they don't exist in. They're some freaky people, but in my opinion, these guys are just manifestations of cut content. They look like other NPCs because they only got placeholder sprites. They're scrapped content for NPCs. If you want more proof, in Deltarune you make your own little goner and guess what happens to it? It gets scrapped. So no, Susie and Sans are not goners. They're the opposite. Goners are scrapped content, Susie and Sans are new content. I feel like I should give this group a name. If goners get a name, then it's only fair, right? I guess I can call them, like, Keepers. I'll call them keepers. In all honesty, this theory is a bit of a stretch, but I feel like it explains a lot of questions in Deltarune. It answers some questions more directly, like how some monsters can bleed and some monsters cannot, but it also explains a lot more smaller questions, like how Susie can be stronger than Chris if all monsters are weaker than humans. It could even explain why normal NPC and all the other would-be goners are acting so weird in Deltarune. They're poorly implemented scrapped content that are acting weird because of it. Or maybe not. Is this the insane ramblings of a Deltarune fan trying to make the next big theory, or is this the start of trying to actually figure out what the hell is going on with monsters and their bodies in Deltarune? You tell me. Whether or not I'm right, I do think Deltarune wants us to question what's going on with monster biology. If it wasn't relevant, I don't think we would have gotten all these examples of the rules of monster biology being reinforced and broken. Even if you don't agree with my theory, I hope you try and think about monster biology and what Deltarune's doing with it yourself. And if you think you know what's going on, tell me in the comments. Maybe click subscribe and like the video. If you love my content, please.